Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to the first released episode of the Badger Den podcast.
Name pending.
Name pending. Probably go with that for now. But here with Sean. And
Hello, I'm Sean.
And hello, I am Sailor. I was a coach at Badger Den for a while. Me and Sean have been friends since high school and kind of started this athleticism journey at around the same time. And yeah. Hello.
Yeah, I guess just some background. Well, like for the podcast first, maybe. So for any of us listening early on here, the idea with this podcast is mostly to start like creating some like somewhere between long and short form content around a lot of the frequently asked questions at the gym. So we can address things a little bit more thoroughly, but also like not have to say it, time after time after time for every new person that comes in. We'll just have like a place that we have this information that we can get it to people, and it just exists on the internet. And save me my breath.
For sure. And then to have it be a bit more conversational too, and hopefully this will spark more people who might have questions pop up just listening to this, or can ask them in chat, or they'll see us around as well at the gym itself too.
Yeah, we're still figuring things out.
Yeah, this is let's grow with us. This is going to be a little bit new. So I think for today we generally wanted to go over what we wanted to achieve with the podcast. And then also maybe talk a little bit about maxing week, and then holiday closings at the gym, and stuff like that.
Yeah. So, to kick it off with, like, intentions behind the podcast, again, I think, like, really bringing it into our community first and, like, making it centered around that first and foremost is important to me because, again, I think, like, really what we're looking at here is more toward, like, having content for our own members so that I don't have to direct people to other things that other people say all the time that like maybe isn't 100% with what I agree with. And, if this like evolves into something bigger, cool, we can always kind of walk that bridge if it comes. But like if this does become a bigger thing, like right now I think we're thinking, again, kind of shorter form, answer questions. Maybe we'll do multiple questions in like an hour, or maybe we'll like spend 15 or 20 minutes on one thing, or down the line as we like get a few of these out, if we feel like people want like more like an hour-long conversation about a specific topic, like that's certainly within the realm too. But like thinking long term, if people like this sort of thing and it starts to grow, we don't have that unique a view on things maybe, but like we do have the intersection of both being like pretty well mired in strength and conditioning, but also having like this really, I don't know, like nerdy side to us. We really like a lot of, things like tabletop RPGs and video games and things like that. And I don't feel like that's necessarily a population that's very well served in this space. And like now me as like also a queer gym owner or queer content creator in this case, I feel like that just brings in more of an audience that's typically underserved.
Yeah, for sure. I think just having like that approach from peoples that are living life as well.
Yeah, right.
It's I think it's, for me, it's always frustrating when I get information from certain sources and the things that they want me to do are impossible for somebody who needs to work a 45-hour week in order to exist.
Have kids on top of that, or be in grad school at the same time. These other things.
It's nuts. Like a really clear example, funny enough, just to kind of jump into it, is the Huberman's morning routine. That he is like the routine for everybody to do, and unfortunately, it seems like a fantastic routine. I just wish I had an extra 3 hours a day to like take advantage of it. And it's for those of you who don't know, some of you might be able to take advantage of this. It's something along the lines of wake up at about 6 to 6:30 every day,
depending on when the sun rises,
and immediately get outside for about a 15 to 20 minute walk to get into contact with the sun. then return to your dwelling and drink some water, purposefully avoid caffeine, add salt to the water, get some rehydration, and then immediately jump into a 90-minute isolated work time where you can get tasks done, typically on like the computer, I guess was the example that was shown, writing or planning. And then following that, I think it's some combination of like physical activity plus caffeine plus cold shower exposure. And then following that, living normal life.
And like I did something very similar to this, on and off, and like maybe in different order sometimes. But this was like very much my early and mid 20s, and then I got a real life and I couldn't do these things anymore. Especially like having to be at the gym 5:45 to 8 in the morning. It's like I miss the sun most of the days.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I have to be at work at 8:30. So right now it is December, and I wake up at 6:30 normally, spend some time just getting ready. It's dark when I get up. I can't go outside and get the sun, and then also trying to slot in at like a 90-minute like work period where I can spend time working on stuff is just impossible. I don't have enough. I'd have to wake up at 5:30, and then I'm not getting like my walk, and then I think ironically enough but then at that point I'm losing sleep. And then at that point, it's like, what was the vertical diet where you're stepping over $100 bills to pick up pennies? It's like now I'm like only getting 5 to 6 hours of sleep a night so that I can adhere to this morning routine regimen that's supposed to make me so healthy. And then it's like I'm becoming less healthy because I'm chronically sleep deprived, which is by far the most important thing, is to just get enough sleep. But funny enough, I thought about it, and those individuals working like second or third shift are probably, strangely enough, the ones to best take advantage of something like this because they backload their day with work. Whereas I think most people working a first shift schedule, they front load their day with work, whereas they wake up and go right to work. Whereas speaking as somebody who's worked both second and third shifts for extended periods of time, at least the way I did it was that I would often wake up and I would have all my free time being after I woke up, go to work, and then come home and almost go to bed right away. And in that instance, following some sort of morning routine where the first 2 to 2 hours-ish of your day can be this thing where you're getting extra work done is, that's something. But, even thinking about it, like as much as I have a very like cerebral job where I need to be working on things, and the idea, it's not very pleasant of an idea to think about like waking up early, doing this thing, sitting down, and then working for 90 minutes on the computer, even if on stuff that I'm passionate about, and then turning around and then going to work and then having to like sit down at a desk again and then like refocus myself on more like work, writing reports, like compiling data. Like it doesn't seem very enjoyable. But
and like on top of that all, like in my situation, my 3-year-olds very frequently wake up before 6. Sometimes it's 5 o'clock, sometimes it's 4:50, sometimes I get lucky and it's not until 5:45. But when I got 2 3-year-olds running around that early in the morning, none of that is like particularly accessible. Even on like a weekday where I'm not, or a weekend where I'm not like required to go to the gym or anything.
Yeah, so I think it's like it will serve well being able to give people
actionable advice.
Yes, I think actionable is like the key,
Because like the other thing with these different routines is like a lot of times people are like, well, fuck, if I can't do any of it like this, then I'm just screwed, right? Mm-hmm. And it's like, well, maybe we can make a different breakdown around these different concepts and like make it in a way that's digestible, because there's a lot of things to that routine that like maybe if you parsed it out correctly you could still get in. It just maybe wouldn't be exactly as Huberman has it laid out, right? And like the other, like I don't want to harp on Huberman, but like the thing with Huberman is he's a good scientist. I'm not an expert on this guy, but he's a good scientist like within his realm, which is like it's something brain related. is it neurophysiology?
Yeah, something like that.
But then he starts to put his toes in the water of all these different disciplines, and he's got like good people on his podcast, but like he espouses himself as an expert in all these different realms, and he comes at everything with the same lens of being this neuro whatever he is, right? And he doesn't really have the experience to understand the context and nuance behind a lot of the different things that he talks about. And, when he's got an expert on, that's one thing because they can, throw in their advice based on their experience. But at the same time, he's missing a lot of things that you can only get by having done this for a long time, right? So when he talks about all these things that are outside of his wheelhouse, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, to give some credit, I find like a lot of these things to be a bit like when you think about like learning languages, and it tends to be that like when you learn one second language, it makes it easier to learn like a third and then a fourth, and there tends to be a tendency for people who are who know a ton of foreign languages to know like a lot of foreign languages, or to just know like a couple. So I think having one expert like field of study does leave you a bit more equipped to evaluate other fields, but it's also a trap, like as you said, because you're always going to be missing something or overgeneralizing or any number of things. I think that like a really good example of this is that it's like I saw an image that was like it was like a bus driving across train tracks, and it was like basic science, and then it was like advanced science. It's like the train coming and like smashing through the bus, and it's like this idea of like when we're in school, we learn like there's 3 states of matter, in elementary, middle school, and then liquid, gas, and solid. And then you kind of come into high school, and if you have like a good program, you start to learn maybe about like plasma as like a 4th state of matter. But there's like 20 something states of matter. Like there's these things like when you start getting into like advanced physics, it's very broad. And I think that's the idea. And unfortunately there's a lot of people who approach giving advice who never not that this is Huberman, but there's a lot of people who give advice who are still stuck on that 3 states of matter.
Right. And I mean, I think a really pertinent one to me is like that same kind of argument, but like basic science is that there's 2 genders.
Yeah, for
right?
sure.
And then if you actually like really start to learn about this stuff, it's like, oh well, maybe there's a little bit more to it. Than that.
I think it's one thing that's really important to remember is that like human beings, like in our nature, like to make boxes for things, and
especially Western society.
Yes, and every rule that is ascribed to something is not like they're not in the loop. Like when we group certain things together, it's not like we like made an agreement with like birds where we're like, all right, birds, now you can only hit your feathers and you fly and you lay eggs and you have this type of nucleus in your cells, and that's it, and you can't do anything more than that. And then it's like, or like mammals or fish, and then all of a sudden like a whale comes along that's like a closer related to wolves than dolphins, and you're like, what? Yeah, get on the fucking team, whales. Like, what are you doing? And it's we make these boxes for things because people fundamentally like to understand things. I think the unknown is scary for humans in general, and want to make these boxes, want to understand these things, but it does lead to a lot of boxes that end up being catch-alls. My background is in microbiology, and we talk about like eukaryote and prokaryote, and then there's archaea, which is like this third group, and it's like, well, if it's clearly a prokaryote, we put it in the prokaryote box, and if it's clearly a eukaryote, we put it in a eukaryote box. But then like anything, like everything that doesn't quite fit is like, that's an archaea. And it's like, so then you end up with these piles, and it's like you have a reasonable eukaryote pile, a reasonable prokaryote pile, and then this like mountain of like microorganisms that we've just classified as archaea because we're just like, well, It's like the junk drawer. It's like, well, all right, put it over here. And I think that there's like so much of this in everything, and even how we approach like fitness and stuff, like people to people, and just
even like thinking about something like a squat, like and being like, oh well, it has to look a certain way or it's not a squat, and it's like, wow,
that's not true. And then, ugh. So,
but anyways, to reel it back in, get off the tangent a little bit here.
I think we were actionable advice,
right?
Yes, and I think that that's really where we're going to be able to thrive with this, and hopefully give that to the gym goers, and especially since it is like a kind of a closer knit community at the gym, and everybody kind of has that in common of like going to the gym, and so it's nice to kind of address everybody at the same time.
Right. And speaking of, I think that's a really good segue, talking about actionable advice and gym members, is test week is coming up starting tomorrow. And for anyone who's been around on percentages a little bit, this is going to be different in format than how we've done tests previously, because we've always kind of done 1 rep max tests where it's been, on Monday we do just the squat, and then on Wednesday it's the bench, and then on Friday it's the deadlift. And for everyone who hasn't heard me talk about this yet, because again, this is one of those things that I've talked about 50 times over the last couple weeks. When we're going into this test week, let me back it up a little bit. I think sometimes when people are having tests every day of a week, like they start to burn out by the end of the week, and then they'll shit the bed on deadlifts. Like I feel like I've seen that just too many times over the last few years. So I don't want to say that you can't do it that way, because definitely people thrive that way. But I'm offering the opportunity to consolidate things a little bit this time around. So like looking at tomorrow's workout, Monday's workout, it's an optional deload day on the percentages where like you can just work up to everything up to 1 rep at 70%, just so you get in some extra practice. It gives you some time to recover a little bit if you feel like, maybe the weekend was a little bit harder than you thought it was going to be, or maybe you're feeling a little bit beat up from the heavy singles the last few weeks, or maybe your kids just fucking woke you up at 2 a.m. and Monday's not a good day for you that day, right? That gives you some time to kind of like collect yourself before we jump into tests. And that also helps us consolidate things a little bit if like you want to do squat and bench in the same day on Wednesday. And then for people who are doing 3 days a week, we can do deadlifts on Friday. And that way we're only testing over 3 days rather than 4 or 5 days. And like squat and bench are really easy to throw together. Deadlift and bench are really easy to throw together if like squats just really take it out of you and you need to wait a little bit and you want to deadlift and bench on the same day. For people that are on 4 days a week, it's going to be a similar thing where Monday's that optional deload, and then you can start your tests on Tuesday if you want, which would again kind of the way it's written is squat and bench, and then deadlift on Thursday, log optionally on Friday. But that's by no means any of the way these are written is not a strict rule. So like if you come in and you want to do, no log press, and you want to do, just squat on Tuesday and then come in deadlift on Thursday and then bench on Friday for whatever reason, that's fine. If you want to squat on Tuesday and bench on Thursday and deadlift on Friday, that's fine. If you want to start squatting on Monday and then fill your other lifts in wherever you'd like them, that's fine. The really only big things I'm going to ask is have some time in between squat and deadlift, right? If you can have at least a day in between, that's pretty reasonable. But also, I would say try and squat first. You typically recover better from squat. Not only is it a lighter lift comparative to deadlift a lot of times, but because you're not coming from a dead stop off the floor, it just tends to be easier on your body generally. So, that's a lot to say that, basically this next week is kind of choose your own adventure and how you want to test. And, the coaches will be there to kind of help you figure out what might be the best for you if you don't have a solid idea coming into it. Again, anybody who likes that format of 1 test a day, right on. Let's go with it. If that doesn't typically work for you, or again, you're one of those people that tends to shit the bed on deadlift by the end of the week, let's figure a different option out, right?
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's that kind of go at your own pace.
I don't think I hear your mic.
Test.
Oh,
okay.
I got you now.
There we go. I wasn't quite talking directly into it. I think that's like a really good, that kind of choose your own adventure style test week is great. And I think it kind of lets you kind of feel out your own body a little bit. And I don't think we necessarily need to remind people like anymore who do test week, but just the idea of making sure you're maximizing your recovery and also knowing like cognitively that you are doing a lot of work. I think even I've fallen in that trap in the past of like coming in for like a test day, especially if I'm like testing bench, and you aren't going to feel as drained at the end of the day usually as you would feel on like a normal workout day, because you're kind of just going in, you're warming up throughout the session, and then you're hitting like one heavy rep that's going to be challenging in that moment, but then after the fact, you know, you might not necessarily feel that you took everything, you know, it super exhausted you. And don't feel like, I know we don't make people do the Metcon on test week who are testing, correct? And I think that's good.
Yes. Because, I mean, ultimately the tests, like, this is kind of a reward for all the training we've put in. Like, really, the hard work is done, right? And now it's kind of time to show it off. And, you know, not everybody's had a great block. Some people, you know, things come up. Life happens, and that's cool. You know, we're just going to come in, and the idea is mostly to just have fun with it. We're not here to, like, you know, if you don't fucking make 104%, then you got to leave the gym forever. You know, it's fine. Like, even in a perfect world, things don't always line up, right? The stars don't always align on test week just because everything else throughout the whole training block went great, right? Because sometimes it's just an off week for one reason or another. I mean, human beings are complex. There's a lot going on inside the body, and you can't always account for all of it. And I try to do a pretty good job of, like, trying to factor in as many variables as I can. But, you know, that's why I also say it's not a numbers-based program. It's an effort-based program, right? And that's really important on test week, too, because I feel like a lot of times people get way too tied to the numbers that are in the app, and those are only ever suggestions. And, like, you know, again, all the training is already done at this point, so anything previous to this is kind of moot. But going into test week, like, really the idea is try not to fail, right? Mm-hmm. And if that means doing 20 pounds less than what the app has you doing, that's fine, right? It's really just trying to find where you're at that given day at the end of the test block or the training block, because really what we want is just good numbers to be working our next block off starting with, right? So, like, you know, some people have had kids at the gym in the last 3-4 months. Some people are going to be having kids soon. And, you know, that throws a wrench in things. And even if you were still able to make it in on training a lot, like, that doesn't mean things are going to go well come test week. And, you know, if you haven't been making it in for a lot of training, maybe you are weaker than you were at the end of the last block. That's okay. That's just, it's part of life. And when we zoom out, you know, I should say, rather, when we're looking at it in the moment, right? Like, it's going to feel like we're not making progress or we're stalling out, or, like, you know, things have really just been up and down the last few months. But if we then kind of zoom out, this wiggly curve will hopefully end up looking a lot more linear. And because, you know, it's never going to be linear at the end of the day, but, like, the idea is, you know, block over block, year over year, things should be nudging up.
Yeah, for sure. And I do think that's kind of funny, especially when you think about just, like, the nature of even going from, like, the base class to, like, the percentages, in that it is kind of a wave progression heading upwards. And macro-wise, zooming out, like you said, there have been a lot of max weeks where I have not done well, and it is okay. Like, yes, I feel like shit in the moment, and it does suck, but we do this thing for ourselves anyways. And so if you don't make a weight, it's all right. You can, but it's all right to be sad too. Like, it's okay. You can
feel your emotions.
You can feel things. It's okay to feel things, but just don't beat yourself up. You know, there's always the next week. You know, there's the next block. There's the next test. There's the next that you can always get back in and do more. And you shouldn't necessarily get too hung up on it, especially if that makes you spiral in certain ways that might not be good then for overall health. Like, you kind of have like that mentality of being like, well, why even train then if I'm just gonna fail?
And I mean, like, nothing's on the line here. We're not competing, right? This is a hobby at the end of the day. It's a cool hobby. You know, you get to do a lot of things that other people can't do because of the things that we do in the gym. But like, this test week is just for fun, right? Like, so don't put too much stress on yourself about it, because like, also, you know, counterintuitively, like, stressing about having to make your fucking lifts is gonna make you more likely to miss your lift, right? So you just like, you know, it's hard to separate logic and emotion, right? So it's like, you know, even if you're like, yeah, it doesn't matter, it doesn't mean that you're gonna feel like it doesn't matter, right? And a lot of that, like, you know, the idea that it doesn't matter really settles in after you've done test week several times, right? Because then you realize, oh, you know, test week is just another drop in the bucket. You know, there's gonna be a lot of these test weeks in my life, and not all of them are gonna go well. That's fine, but yeah, so just don't put too much on yourself coming into test week. If it's there, great. If it's not, that's okay.
Yeah, I still get nervous. So
Yeah.
and I think that's like a huge thing too that you hit on, is just the idea of just being like, and then you hyper focus on everything. Everything feels like weird. Stuff isn't like moving how you want it to, and it's like, it's all right.
And that's, you know, that's also not the case for everybody. You know, some people come in and they're just like, fuck yeah, I'm just like, I'm fucking on it today. I'm going to be huge tomorrow, which, you know, that's not how test week works. Again, we're not training anymore, but
if only.
Yeah, I mean, especially the people newer to percentages, they're going to crush it because they have less training under their belt, right? So they're not as close to their ceiling as some people who have been on percentages longer, right? But yeah, you know, that's probably enough talk. Unless you had something else you wanted to add.
No. I think beating that horse to death and then some. What do we got next on the agenda?
I think we're just like wrapping with the last couple things. What are we at time wise?
28 minutes, but we also had like 4 minutes of like nonsense in the beginning,
so this will be just about perfect if we want like a 20 to 30 minute cast.
Yeah, I think that's great.
So like, just starting off, just a reminder that we're going to be closed the 25th through the 2nd, so the first class back will be on the 3rd. There will be like deload workouts in the app for the week of Christmas and for those first few days of January for anybody that wants to get in, if you've got that open gym access. But yeah, just know that we're not going to have class on, you know, December 27th or whatever. And then the first real week back in training for people who are on percentages is going to be that following week, which I think is, the 8th for that Monday? Either way, the first real week back of training for percentages is going to be the 2nd week of January. So, like, if you're not there for that first week of January, which plenty of us might not be if you're traveling for holidays and things like that, it's cool. Don't worry about it. The next thing is just thinking about, like, future topics for the podcast. We want to, like, open up a survey to people and see, like, what things people are interested in learning about. You know, mostly just like, you know, oh, do you want to learn more about protein and protein requirements, or like how much you should be getting in a day, or do you want to know like how to set up meals to try and get protein in as best you can, or do you want to learn about like trying to add low intensity steady state cardio to this program if you're looking for more like an aerobic base, or like is there something about recovery you want to learn about, something about nutrition, or any of those kinds of topics, right? I want to leave it pretty open-ended, and if anything comes up multiple times, then that's probably what we're going to address first. But just like, I don't want this to be like, oh, what do we want to talk about? It's more so like, oh, what does the gym need? What can the gym really benefit from for us to talk about and disseminate some of this information we've gathered over nearly 15 years of doing this each. So that survey we're going to have linked alongside this podcast in the newsletter. So it should already be something you're aware of if you looked at the newsletter first.
Yeah, and then I guess a kind of expected format length. This episode's a little bit shorter, kind of like doing the kickoff sort of explanation of things. But I think generally we were shooting for about 45 minutes to an hour tops of an episode. I think that's a clean amount of time to be able to listen to this at like work or during commutes through the week.
Or while you do your low intensity steady state cardio.
Or hell yeah.
Which I do not do.
I need to start doing.
Yeah, it's on my list.
Get my steps in there again. I'm doing pretty poor for my step wise. But hell yeah. I think that's a good spot to kind of stick a pin in it. So thanks everybody for tuning in on this first episode.
Oh, and before we sign off, I just want to say thanks to everybody for sticking around, for those of us that have been around for a long time, not just listening to this, but the people that have been at the gym, right? And anybody who's come within this last year, come within the last few weeks. Welcome to the club. I hope you are enjoying your time at the gym, and thanks to everybody for another great year. This has been the end of our 5th year. We started in January 2018, so we're going into year 6 here, which is a fucking long time.
It's a long time.
I like when I had kids in 2020, like time just kind of dropped off the map. It doesn't make sense to me anymore because it still feels like I've only been open for like 2 or 3 years. But
to be fair to not even just necessarily having the kids, like 2021 and 2022 feel like made up years. Like I don't think they happened. I think everybody went through a warp. I remember 2020 and like now. I don't know what happened in between then, but.
Well,
right,
thanks
bye-bye.
everybody. Have a happy holiday. I'll see most of the people listening to this at the gym within the next week for tests, and then it'll be a nice break for everybody. Goodbye.